Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Ready, Set, Talk. I am so excited to have our guests here tonight, Mr. Khalid Scott and Mr. Douglas Lapsley, and they're going to talk about an amazing topic that I think affects our community on a daily basis. A lot of you are wondering what is learned helplessness, what is emotional intelligence. Well, if you hang around, you're going to find out because they're going to dig into the conversation and really talk about how we deal with this. Sometimes we're living and learn helplessness and not even realizing it. We're teaching our children to be learn helplessness and not even realizing it. So I think tonight is going to be a great discussion. I want you to hang around, put your questions in the comments. Questions, comments, whatever, just put it in there. Let's talk. Let's have a conversation. I'm excited about what these two gentlemen have to say and how they're going to bring education to this topic. So I advise you to hang around, stick around, listen, learn, and grow from learned helplessness to emotional intelligence. Mr. Douglas Lapsley and Mr. Khalid Scott, I'm going to let you guys take it from here. Let's tell the people, what do we mean when we say learned helplessness and emotional intelligence?
Okay. Well, let me start with a little bit of the history behind it. It was learned helplessness was discovered by two psychologists back in the 1960s, Martin Seligman and Stephen Meyer. And what they did was they had a control group of about nine dogs. And what they did with the dogs was they put the first group in a cage, and the dogs were just getting really restless. And then they opened up the cage and the dogs immediately ran out. The second group, they put the dogs in the cage, but now it had electrical shocks. So the dogs kept jumping and jumping and jumping, but there was a button inside the cage. So as the dogs was jumping, they seen the button and they kept poking their nose at the button, and the cage opened up and the dogs ran out. The third cage, when they put dogs in there, the third set of dogs they put in a cage, they had the electrical charges going, and the dogs were jumping and jumping and jumping, but the button that had the box had a glass case behind it. So it just kept getting shocks and shocks and shocks and shocks and shocks. So they stopped the experiment. They opened up the cage, let all the dogs out, and then they did an open cage where on one side they had electric shocks. On the other side, there was no shocks to get out. So they put the first set of dogs in that immediately ran out the cage. As soon as they got the shocks, they hopped over to the other side, got out. The second group that pressed the button did the exact same thing. They hopped over, got out. The third group, who was used to all of the shocks, sat in there and took all of the shocks. Yeah. Didn't even try to escape. And so in correlation to that, what learned helplessness is basically when one has a sense of powerlessness and believes that they're unable to gain control of their particular situation to where they can mentally process it to find a solution, they'll stay in that state because they believe that there is no other way to get out. Now, that was a experiment with animals. How does it translate? Right, and that's where now how it translates to humans, that's where I'm gonna go ahead and get with Mr. Scott. So how does learned helplessness, just in that experiment, how does it translate into, let's say with children, into different stages of psychosocial developments, even adults? How does learned helplessness translate in these different areas, particularly in our culture as well?
Right. So when you were telling the story, and I hope the viewers take that in, is that it sounded like what? Trauma, right? And that the different sets of dogs learned how to deal with that trauma based on what they were delivered, right? And so that's what we do as human beings all the time. We learn how to deal with our trauma, and we learn how to deal with it based on what we've been taught to how to deal with it, right? Mm. So let's say, for instance, talking about children. So the children learn that, wow, if I do something, if I'm mischievous, if I do something wrong, then more than likely I am going to get a spanking, right? Now, does that always is used as an incentive for kids to not to do what they are going to do? Absolutely not. But depending on the severity of that spanking and what the consequences that came with that spanking, then you find that children have a way of, oh, wow, I've learned my lesson, or I learned how to navigate differently. And navigate means I'll do something, but I'll be sneaky about it. I'll do something, but have somebody else take the blame for it, right? Or I'll have my excuse of why I did it ready so that mommy will not spank me. Like I had a cousin and he was mischievous. But one of the things he learned how to do early on is that when my auntie got ready to spank him with the belt, he would hug her. And that made her melt. She's like, get off of me. Now you go to bed. So he got out of that spanking because he learned early on, let me hug mommy, make her melt, and then she'll just send me to bed. So it's how you react to the trauma that I'm dealing with.
Right. And I think that's a good point. Speaking to that, just in those early stages of psychosocial development, where you have that, that autonomy stage.
Right.
And naturally, you're going to be very, very curious in that particular stage. And in that stage where, the initiative versus guilt, the autonomy, they're trying to figure out different things.
Right.
And this is where learned helplessness can also hop in. Because one of the things I do with my grandson, right? My wife got furious. She got furious. One time he had this box of oats, Quaker oats.
Okay.
And the lid was open. And she had just cleaned the floor, in the kitchen.
Oh.
And so she was like, get him. I said, no, I just want to watch and see what he does.
Okay.
And he spilled it all on the floor. But what I did was, she was livid. She had to go upstairs. And I said, sweetheart, I'm teaching him something.
Yes.
Because earlier, there was a bad habit of he dropped something, she go pick it up. Drop something, go pick it up. And even I had that habit. Right. But I had to catch myself in doing that. So when I let him spill it all over the floor, I got a little brush and a little dustpan. And I held his hand with me and he did it. And then I let him go. And then he was trying to do it himself.
Excellent.
But in that early stage, what learn helplessness do, if every time the child is doing something and you are coming to their rescue, even in something as small as that, they are learning to be helpless and not being able to solve the problem. At that particular point, that is where the zone of proximal development comes in. That is where that more knowledgeable other needs to step in and be like, hey, here's how you pick it up. Here's how you do it. Another example, he got upset one day because he didn't want to eat his broccoli. He got upset, threw it on the floor. My wife was going to kill him. Don't kill him. I said, don't do it. I said, guess what? He's going to sit there until we are done eating. Pulled it out. Guess what we did? We grabbed the dustpan, grabbed that, made him clean it off the floor and put it in there. But learned helplessness would be, why did you do that? And you notice every time, when parents do it, the child drops something, they picking it up. The child drops something, they're picking it up. Well, if you translate into later stages of psychosocial development, like the industry versus inferiority stage, which is the school stage, it is the same thing over and over again. The child drops something, you picking it up. The child drops something, you picking it up. And then it just translates, if it's not caught, but it is so, learned helplessness is so subtle to where you're thinking that you are actually helping, but you're actually disabling them and teaching them to be solely dependent on you without solving the problem. That's one of the things that I saw about that project with Learn Helplessness.
Got it.
I just had to pop in and say, I love that example, Douglas, because such a simple example of something we as parents and grandparents do on a daily basis. And we don't think that I am teaching my child how to not be able to solve a problem.
Correct.
We see that this is a baby, this is a 1-year-old, this is a 2-year-old. And so let me just let me tell them. I'm teaching them by telling them, and then I'm going to do it. Well, you're contradicting. You're saying one thing and doing another thing. That's actually creating a contradiction,
Yes.
which thereby enhances the learned helplessness, promotes the learned helplessness even more. So that was, I just wanted to pop in and say that was a great example.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes,
absolutely.
sir.
Absolutely. And thank God you had the fortitude to say, wait a minute, let's stop in our tracks. This is a moment of clarity, one, and two, a learning moment for all of us, right? And because we want to raise good citizens, productive citizens, well-adjusted young citizens, right?
Yes,
But
sir.
we do the polar opposite. And it's not on purpose, it's so unconscious, right? Because in our head, by me doing it, they're seeing me doing it. I'm role modeling the behavior. But
Yep.
nothing beats the hands-on effects when they do it themselves.
Yep.
Right?
Yes,
And that's across the board. I can't do the homework assignment for them. I have to let them sit at the kitchen table, and I got to let them struggle for 30 minutes to solve these problems. I can go in there and assist. I can teach them, like, if it's 5 minus 5,
right,
0. You know what I'm saying?
right.
And it's just that baseline that makes a difference. And remember, children are used to repetitiveness, right?
Yes.
They're used to learning patterns early on. So if you start teaching them good patterns, positive patterns, consistent patterns, then that solves a whole lot of the problems we deal with when we become adults.
Yes, sir.
And learn to be dependent.
Yes, sir.
Let me throw this out. I get calls every week, and I'm not exaggerating, Douglas, from mothers of young adults, because I'm in my mid-50s. I know I don't look like it, right? But and they was like, Khalid, my 20-something-year-old is dot 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 dot. And I said, okay, keep talking, keep talking. Then I said, Mom or Dad, guess whose fault it is? And they was like, who? Yours. What do you mean? What do you mean? You have taught your child how to treat you. You have taught them how to be dependent on you because you crave that feeling of being needed. But now you're taught after 23 years and you got a grown man in your house who still don't know how to do his laundry because you've always done his laundry on Sunday mornings. Now you're complaining. And one of the things that talks about with learned helplessness is that they complain all the time instead of saying, let me do the work to be better.
Yep. And it's unconscious. And it's also learned helplessness. For those who don't know, it's also it's one of many of the underlying causes to depression.
Yes.
And so unconsciously, the child really resents depending on that other person to a degree to where they cannot even function on their own.
Right.
Yeah, even from those early stages. Here's another opportunity, or here's another example. As we were going through and you were talking about grown men, I'm gonna address the fathers. As fathers, sometimes we get upset with our sons or daughters, but I got boys getting upset with our sons, right? Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? I've shown you the example. I've shown you what it means to get up on time. What is to do this on time. I've showed you how to study. I've shown you how to prepare. I've shown you how to do this. Wait a minute. You saw it, but really did I teach you the mechanics of it?
That's right.
You saw me do it. Dad can do it. Dad gonna get up at 4:00. But the mechanics would dictate how many alarm clocks do I set? You see what I'm saying? Things like that. If I know I'm supposed to be at the job at this time, what time should I leave here? Maybe I'm assuming you don't know, or maybe I'm assuming you know, but you probably don't. Right. Wait a minute. How can you? Wait a minute. You went to 5 or 6 interviews but didn't get a job? Wait a minute. Have I taught you how to build a cover letter and a resume? Have I taught you how to do a 30-second elevator pitch? See, learn helpless is, like I said, it's so subtle,
Yes. And
but
it's not
needed.
on purpose. It's
Right,
not
and
on
it's not on purpose. But in the zone of proximal development, if I am the more knowledgeable other, the way the theory dictates, I got to always take a look at those minute things. Just because I assume they know it because they saw me do it doesn't mean they know how to do it like they saw me do it.
right.
And I
Absolutely.
think that's where learned helplessness also slides in when we do that. And then
Right.
we hear as parents, we say, well, I've done all I know how to do. So why are they still, in this particular state? And
Right.
some of it is because of the condition of learned helplessness, that
Right.
sense of powerlessness.
Right. And let me throw this out there in the atmosphere. I want every parent listening, even you, Doug, and even you, for the regular listening audience. Ask your child, like if you are the parent, like me, drove my daughter to school every day, right? Because I live in the suburbs of Chicago. My daughter went to school in Chicago, so she was never going to catch a bus, a train, or a cab, because it's Chicago, right?
Right.
I asked my daughter, I said, Anaya, name the 5 streets in front of our address and the 5 streets behind our address, our street.
That's good.
She was like, Paxton, what's the street behind us? Okay, Carrington, and I don't know, Daddy. I said, Naya, you don't know the streets? It's not like you're asleep in a car. We'll drive past them. You can't tell me the streets? She was like, Daddy, I don't pay attention when you driving. Right? And so I was like, wow. As compared to now, if somebody was to ask her, how do I get to your dad's house? She could say, well, turn left, turn right, turn left, turn right. But she wouldn't be able to name the streets. And see, that wasn't me trying to be malicious and not teach her the streets. Mm-hmm. It's just I would assume that she would know by observation, right? And Doug, let me do something real quick, a little experiment with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Doug, say the ABCs for me.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. Sesame Street.
Right. Now sing them backwards to me. Go.
Oh, God.
Go. Don't pause or nothing. Go.
Oh, I can't sing them backwards like that. Oh, you got me. You got me. You got me.
See, we've learned one way to do something. And the minute we're challenged, we're like, oh, wow. No one ever teaches us to know the ABCs backwards.
That's good.
And I was like, let me learn them backwards. And everybody I do the experiment with is like, whoa, I can't do. It'll be Z, X, Y, V, U, T. But you got to practice that.
Yeah.
But then it's an excitement when you're learning something new, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's go with that. Let's learn something new. Let's get out of the dependency. Let's break the things that we've learned and unlearn the bad stuff and learn something new. And it makes us grow.
It even resonates with me, that exercise, when we also assume because we've learned something that's so common,
yes,
that we can't learn something new about what is common.
Right.
So that's good. I'm gonna take that one from you. So don't worry about it.
This is what I did when I was challenged. I did a post-it.
Right.
And so I'm going to learn them backwards.
Yeah. So now I did one experiment. It wasn't that one. I did another one. I did another one where it was with a group of kids, in the community. I had half on this side, half on that side. I was doing my research on learned helplessness. And so I had three I had three words, 1, 2, 3. I had bat, whirl, and another letter. Then I had 3 words that were unsolvable, like you couldn't do them backwards.
Okay.
You couldn't scramble them around to make another word.
Okay.
So I had them spread out in the class, and I said, okay. I had them spread out in the experiment. I said, okay, I want y'all to go ahead and take word number 1, and you see word number 1. I want you to go ahead and try to create a different word out of it. And I said, be quick, be quick. And I was rushing them. I'm like, be quick. And I was like, raise your hand if you got it. The ones that had the bat word turned into tab, they could raise their hand. The ones that had the unsolvable ones couldn't. They didn't raise their hand. So I was like, okay, well, let's go ahead and go to the second one because we run out of time. Did it with the second one. So the group that had all the solvable words kept raising their hand. The group that didn't, they were just getting frustrated because I was rushing them. And then at the end, I said, how'd that make you feel?
Mm-hmm.
And they was like, man, he was like, after the second word, I said, forget it. I said, why did you say forget it? He was like, couldn't figure it out.
Got it.
And then I said, you know why you couldn't figure it out? I said, because I gave you words that were unsolvable. So as parents, even as husbands, we can actually induce learned helplessness by putting them in a situation to where it's unsolvable, to where you need me to help you. And that right there is extremely dangerous and crippling.
Yes.
When we do that for a husband, if I die today, my wife should know where the insurance is, where everything is. I have what's called a I Leave Me book.
Yes.
To where, because she's already going to be dealing with the trauma of loss. She doesn't need to deal with the trauma of ignorance because of the loss.
Absolutely.
And it's the same thing that we do in marriage, same thing we do in parenting. And even now, being a new, master professional in the clinical area, dealing with how do you deal with your child when they do everything right and everything goes wrong?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now they feel like, hey, I did all the right things that my parents told me how to do, and everything flopped. So why should I try again when I tried to do it the way you told me to do it and it didn't work? That right there is the red flag for learned helplessness.
Right.
That, as a skilled counselor and clinician, I had to see through that,
Absolutely. And so then we talk about, well, then how do I get out of that rut? How do I go from learned helplessness to learn to be helpful? Learn not to be vulnerable, right? And so the first thing is, it starts here. Do I want to change? Do I want to not feel dependent? Do I want to feel independent? Do I have enough acuity? Do I have enough capital? Do I have enough incentive to say, I want to do better because I don't like the pattern that I'm stuck in, right? And I tell anybody, you always start a transition slowly. So, Doug, I lost 100 pounds over the last 7 months, right? So September of last year, I was 321 pounds.
I'm in your same story.
Okay.
I'm your same story.
Okay.
They'll tell you. Yeah,
connected.
I lost over 100 in the last year. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm telling you.
And so 7 months later, I'm 217, so over 100 pounds. And when I did a post about it, and people were like, whoa, how? In 7 months? I said, I started slow, but first I had to fix this. I'm from Chicago, so I love stuffed pizza, right? I love it. And my doctor's office is across the street from my favorite pizza restaurant. So that day I left his office, when he told me I was 321 pounds, I was like, though I love that pizza, I got to do something different. I went to the grocery store and bought $300 worth of fruits and vegetables and chicken breasts. Then I went to the gym that same week. Now, I didn't do 30 minutes at 10.0. I did 30 minutes at 2.0. But as I started to get into my diet and exercise routine, I was able to push that button and increase and increase. and increase. So now 8 months later, I am at 10 point. I can do a whole 10.0 for 30 minutes, but I had to build up my momentum.
Yep.
So when you're trying to start something to change for the better, start slow, because you don't ever want to rush. And you want it to be, what is that word when you cold turkey. Cold turkey never wins typically,
Right.
because then you crave and then you go what? Binge. Start it slow. Start off, instead of eating chips, start eating peanuts, right? Instead of eating candy, start eating raisins,
Yep.
right? So you can start convincing your mind, these raisins are still sweet like gummy worms, but they are healthy sweet, right? So that's just real important to go and transition to a healthier mindset.
Yep. That's a good point, because I was on that journey myself, and then once I got on that journey, then
Yes.
staying on it. One of the things I learned in that journey, and it goes along with learn helplessness, is I stopped messing with healthy foods I didn't like and started messing with healthy foods I did like.
Got you.
So when I started messing with healthy foods I did like, I was able to stick with it consistently, and it was still healthy to the body. I don't like cauliflower, but I love broccoli.
Got you.
So
That's
if I
right.
got to eat one or the other each and every day, I'm gonna eat the healthy one I do like.
Right. And then for
And
me, I put barbecue sauce on it.
you
So it was
see,
like,
you gotta get a little taste. You gotta get a little taste.
absolutely.
But the fact of the matter is, I'm eating healthy. And to your point, in the mind, learning about learn helplessness, and it being that it has those components of the underlying cause of depression. Those small changes that you're talking about. Okay, instead of just focusing on what went wrong, what did right in the process. So how can we duplicate what went right in the process before things went wrong? Okay, now let's analyze. Now let's analyze where the drop off is, to where we can change that around. So let's say your son got all F's on the report card. You angry. So you make some adjustments. They learn to make some adjustments. Now it went from 4 F's to probably 2 F's and 3 D's.
Yes.
That's showing you some progress,
Absolutely.
because they're not in the same state that they were. And that's the thing with learned helplessness, is that when you believe, and it's a belief system, when you believe that there is no solution to your problem, you tend to be dependent upon people to solve it for you. And 9 times out of 10, you listening to the wrong folk.
Absolutely.
Unqualified, uncertified folk who going to tell you something about your problem when they're probably dealing with learned helplessness and things like that. So let's transfer into emotional intelligence. Like, what does that mean when we hear emotional intelligence? What does that mean, emotional intelligence?
It's to be in control and have power of your emotions. It's that baseline. It's that simple. To have the intellect to say, I could do this, but am I going to be able to deal with the consequences of my action, right? So I can get mad, at my girlfriend, and it could be something she did, but then if I take my hands and strike her, then I go to jail. Instead of, babe, you were really disrespectful to me. So what I'm going to do is I'm about to grab my gym bag and I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to have to work it out. And while I'm going, can you please think about your presentation to me, right? So then when I do come back and I'll be in a better spirit, then we can talk this out and not go to bed, with anger, It's controlling your emotions. Anytime you are led with negative emotions, you're going to always have negative what? Outcomes.
Exactly.
So basically what you're saying, Mr. Khalid, is that when you're dealing with emotional intelligence and when you're practicing emotional intelligence, it can't be about your ego.
Not at all.
It can't be about a win-lose thing. It can't be about all the superficial things that tend to come as a result of an argument or disagreement or being wronged by someone. It has to be an intentional tapping into the maturity.
That's right.
Of your emotions.
Right.
Right.
And what goes along with that is you got to talk yourself down immediately.
Right.
And if that means 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, okay. And then you got to go into the immediately of soothing yourself, like calm down, calm down. I can't stand my boss, but I need that paycheck on Friday. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
I don't want to get fired,
Exactly.
you know? And then it's saying, if I lash out, did that person, were their intentions to really hurt me, or is it just how I took it?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Try to show some empathy and sympathy.
Exactly.
And those three the components to help you get to that intellectual place.
Yep. And I'll even go a step further with emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is also with emotional regulation.
Yes.
So the EI and the ER.
Yes.
So emotional intelligence is me recognizing that I'm angry. The intellect of when I'm angry, this is how I feel. This is how my heart jumps. This is how my fingers move. This is how I think. This is how I think about that. This is how I think about this. That's emotional intelligence. Regulation is now how do I exercise it?
Yes.
Now how does it regulate my behavior?
Right.
Emotional regulation. So there's sometimes I ain't gonna lie, because we black men here. There's sometimes I'll get upset. You know, my wife might say something, I get upset. Instead of me saying something, I'll go to the gym and put it on the weights.
There you go.
And I'll do some barbell squats till my legs burn until it's that. Then by the time I'm done doing that, I'm like, man, I don't even know what I was upset about, but I sure am tired, man.
And that's the best workout, man, when you just taking it out.
And that also helped me drop them 100 pounds. You know, I was using my emotional regulation. I put it into something, but
Absolutely.
I put it into something constructive. I didn't grab boxing gloves and do that. That's bad emotional regulation, because then when you get angry, you want to hit something. No, with emotional regulation, constructive emotional regulation, guess what I do? If I'm really angry, I get on that treadmill, push it up as high as I can, and run till my lungs collapse. But guess what? I'm getting it out in a particular, in a constructive way. Absolutely. And these are some of the things that in our community we don't like to hear, especially among black men. Oh, talking it out. Oh, you soft. No, you wise. You wise. Because at the end of the day, I'm able to go back home and not get put out, and still able to process what I was thinking about and actually have an articulate conversation about why I was angry.
Absolutely.
I think one of the things I hear you guys saying that I really like, that I think is going to be good for people to understand, is that emotional intelligence does not mean you don't feel your feelings. It does not mean you try to deny and try to act as if your anger doesn't exist or your pain doesn't exist. It says acknowledge that, yeah, I'm feeling this. This is impacting or affecting me. Now, how do I process? How do I manage this? How do I put this in a positive perspective so that I don't reap the negative consequences as a result of my negative behaviors?
That's right. That's right. That's
right. There's a good book. There's a good book by Buster Benson that I use now. By Buster Benson. It's called Why Are We Yelling? The Art of a Productive Disagreement. Mm-hmm. And there's 3 realms that he talks about: the head, the heart, and the hands. Out of those 3 realms, disagreements always present themselves. Either it's an intellectual issue, either it's an emotional issue, or it's a service issue, a service issue, or it's a combination of all 3. And those are the 3 core components of a disagreement. Now, where you can make it productive is when you have emotional intelligence, emotional regulation, and you're able to deal with those 3 components of the disagreement, because disagreement also brings out weaknesses and strengths in your conversation.
Yes.
Absolutely. That's what it also does. Disagreement brings out weaknesses and strengths in your conversation, and weaknesses and strengths in your relationship. that probably can be recognized and be fixed, because now you have the emotional intelligence, emotional regulation to recognize, here we go. Here's what the old folks say. What are we even arguing about?
Right. And I think it's important that we lay out the 4 components of emotional intelligence. So it's self-awareness, being aware that I got a temper, and being aware that what is my interventions when my temper is there, right? Then next is self-management. How do I put my self-interventions in place when somebody pushes those buttons? How do I manage myself to make sure the outcome is in my favor? The next, social awareness. Maybe I don't need to go to a certain place where people act a certain way, because I might go there. You know, I might not need to go to a bar with people who may be a little racist, because I might feel a certain way. So why put myself in that situation? And then lastly, relationship management. How do I want to manage the relationships, whether it's coworkers, whether it's my family, whether it's my friendship? How do I manage my village? How do I manage my village?
That's good. That's good.
Wonderful, wonderful. This has absolutely been an awesome conversation. You know, I learned from listening, and I'm sure that other people have learned from listening. But before we go, I want to ask Mr. Khalid and Mr. Lapsley, what is something that you want to say to the listeners as a takeaway? If you had to give them 1 or 2 things as a takeaway, what would it be?
Okay. Start with some self-love. Start with, in the middle of, and end with some self-love. Because once you have the greatest love affair with yourself, right? You will never put yourself in situations, right? And scenarios where you will hurt yourself. Learn to self-regulate. Know who you really are. And also learn people. When people show you who they are, believe them. And that part that we always miss, the first time.
Yes.
So then you understand, may not need to be around you, because we ain't a match.
Right. Wonderful. Mr. Lapsley?
I would say for me, caveating on what he is saying, education. I don't mean in the college classroom. Here's a good one. The book I just said by Buster Benson, Why Are We Yelling? The Art of Productive Disagreement. That's a good place to start. So the key to changing and learning about emotional intelligence and emotional regulation and learning all these other different things, find books, credible material surrounding your situation that you can read for self and apply it. You're only going to go as far as your knowledge take you. So if you limit yourself in what you're exposed in the material that you're exposing yourself to, you only know what you know. So challenge what you don't know, just like he gave the example of the ABCs backwards. Okay, we know it's common in relationships that we're going to have disagreements. Okay, so now let's do it backwards. Now look at those 3 realms, the head, the heart, and the hands. Do it backwards. So don't take the things that you know to be common and not shake it up to see what else you can find within it. You know what I mean? So education for me, I'm always, you know me, I always got books and books and books, and I'm always reading because I'm always trying to challenge what I don't know.
Got you. Are you still a student right now?
Yeah, I am a clinical mental health counseling intern. I already have my first master's in psychology with especially in child and adolescence. So now I'm in the intern of clinical mental health counseling.
Gotcha. I could tell because you're using all the terminology, and I'm like, okay, let me pull this DSM-5 out.
Yeah, I got mine with me, but you know, I got my Jedi master here, Dr. McDaniel. So that's her fault. The way I am is her fault. She's been teaching me the ways of the force ever since I started. So, but yeah, education. I cannot stress that enough, especially for a Black man who leads his home.
Yes.
Your family will only go as far as your knowledge will take you. So I challenge you
Absolutely.
to educate yourself. You ain't got to be no professor or have no titles, but pick up a book, but pick up books surrounding the people that you're leading.
Absolutely. And as you see this back wall, that's me and my daughters,
Yeah.
all of our education, because this the Huxtable house here. It's
Yeah.
about your education. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Once you have knowledge, nobody can take it away from you.
Can't take it away from you.
Take it away from you. Awesome discussion. Awesome discussion. Thank you so much for watching. Whether you're watching us live or you're watching the replay, I hope this has been helpful and informative. We look forward to seeing you on next month as we have another great topic that we're going to be ready, set, and talk. Remember, real issues affecting real people in real life. Have an amazing evening.
Real issues affecting real people in real life. Ready, set, talk. Real issues affecting real people in real life. Ready, set, talk. Come on and talk about it. We're gonna talk about it. Let's all talk about it. 'Cause we're real people in real life. Ready, set, talk.